It's an antique school clock.
Well,
It's
we have a
loud.
grandfather's clock right out there in the hall. I thought, oh, surely they can't hear mine that loud.
Does it show that it's recording?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, give me just a second, because
I got one of those too.
okay. Now I have to get back. Hey, Mr. Piter, it's so good to see you.
He's muted because he's
Okay, why did I
beeping.
lose everybody?
Jane is trying to, they've had problems with their phone lines. So she muted him so that, because it was beeping all the time.
Oh, okay. All right, so Gina, we only have the one thing, so.
Okay, let's call this meeting to order. And the first thing is public financing. Brent Blevins, you're up.
Morning, everyone. We appreciate the opportunity here. I know Gina called. We've talked a few times kind of about some pretty neat projects that you all are looking at and your continued growth, and that's exciting for a library district. And I'm happy for you all. We sent you a PowerPoint presentation just to kind of tell you a little bit about Stiefel and who we are. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because Joe and I really just want to talk to you about your project, about the financing, and just answer any questions you might have, give you some thoughts on what we're thinking in regards to what that would look like, and really just get some feedback from you. We enjoy doing these things. We enjoy partnering with public entities across the state. So on that slide, like I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'll give you briefly a little overview on it. As you can see, I'm Brent Blevins. I'm from Southwest Missouri. I was raised in the Mountain Grove, Forsyth area, was a superintendent of schools down in Forsyth for several years, and ended up finishing my career retiring out of the Lee Summit School District in Kansas City when I joined George K. Baum, which is now Stiefel, and was fortunate enough to come back to Springfield. We have several clients in the Springfield area of school districts, of fire districts, cities. We've done library districts, even ambulance districts. So Joe and I work with about 200 clients across the state, and have enjoyed doing that. So obviously my passion's in the public sector. I'm a retired public administrator, a public teacher. My parents were as well. So with that said, I truly enjoy doing what I do now, is working with school districts and other public entities across the state of Missouri. That's been my passion and my family's passion for a long time. And Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll also say that Joe's the superintendent of the Blue Springs School District, and others are retired administrator or teacher from the Blue Springs School District. So he has public service in his blood as well. So good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Dr. Blevins, and good morning to all of you. Thank you for having us today. Brent probably said all the relevant information about me. My name is Joe, and I've been doing this for almost 15 years, basically right out of school for me, and really enjoy it. Really enjoy working with people all over Missouri and all waves. So you can see that I'm not sitting in front of a sign either. I'm sitting in my basement. So if you hear any loud noises, that is almost certainly my son pretending to be the Incredible Hulk directly above me. So I apologize about that, but he's a big fan of the Hulk right now and thinks that he can make big noises. So anyway, we're excited to be here, excited to get a chance to talk to you all about your financing. And as Brent said, it's a very exciting project, and what a great amount of support from your community given the times to be able to pass the levy to get this done. So congratulations to you all. That's a big deal. And great credit to the work that you all are doing for your communities. That's awesome, and we congratulate you on that.
Yeah, we won't ask Joe underneath that blazer. We're not going to ask you, Joe. So don't worry. Yeah, so as you can see on the next page, we are the #1 underwriter in Missouri. We did 28.83 of the par amount of deals and negotiated deals in the state. You can see the next would be 20% at Morgan Stanley. Then it drops all the way down to under 10%, which is Larry Hart, and we've just got a chart there. We've got offices all over the state. Obviously, Joe's out of Kansas City. My office is in Springfield. Our nationwide headquarters is in St. Louis, so we're a Missouri-based business, which obviously you can tell that given the amount of deals that we do here in the state of Missouri. And then the last slide there you can see is just our nationwide presence. We have over 200 investment bankers. We have 36 offices across the country in 25 states. We rank 7th in par and #1 in the country in ranking by issues. So #1 in the country, and then obviously #1 in Missouri. So what does big mean to us? Big means to us, when Joe and I came to Stifel, was just the ability to go out and access investors to give our clients the lowest yields possible, which means the lowest interest rates. And in my simple world as a retired superintendent, the most projects for my money. When we can get low interest rates, that's just more money that goes to your project. So we're excited to be with Stifel. We're excited to be with you all today. I know that we've got some things to talk about, and really this is very relaxed. Just jump in at any time when we're going over these things and asking questions, because we love feedback from you, because this is not about us. This is about providing what you need in a format that fits your library district, so that it meets not only facilities but also finances. So that's what we're here for. And I know I talked to Gina several times, and you've had a campaign where you have some money, I believe just over $600,000 that maybe you could put toward this project. Just over a $6.2 million project at this time. I know you're still trying to get some numbers from your architects in deciding what this total cost is going to be. So we've kind of just ran some numbers based upon right around $5.6 million. We just basically took the 6.215, took out the $615,000, and just put some preliminary numbers together of about $5.6 million. Now, as you know, the market is what the market is, right? We're estimating these. Our syndicate desk is in St. Louis. Like I said, we've got over 200 salesmen in our syndicate desk. And I know Joe was speaking with them yesterday, trying to get an idea of where some of these maturities would be, trying to get an idea of where your library district might fall. We've got several different avenues to talk about. We've got, private placement. We've got an opportunity to go underwrite this thing and sell it on the public market. We want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to get some underlying rating or potentially insurance, some costs of issuance. And I know what you all also want to talk about is, where are you seeing interest rates come in right now? By doing this, obviously Joe and I always want to emphasize when we go into these things, we don't know what the market will be the day that we sell or place these certificates or bonds. And so for anyone to come in and say, here's what your interest rate is going to be, is just not accurate, because we just don't know that, right? Until the day of. If we knew that, we could all have mansions on Table Rock Lake and not worry about it. So we do have some indicated rates from our syndicate desk, and I'm going to let Joe kind of go talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Brent. A good starting point. And I do want to bring back just really quickly to that slide and tell you kind of how deceiving some of those numbers can be. So as you look at us as a #1 ranking, you might think that Stifel is a big company, which we are, that only does big deals. But if you look at the year 2020, you see Morgan Stanley is #2 at 20% of the total volume of bonds that went out in Missouri tax exempt. That, folks, is one deal for Morgan Stanley. They did the Kansas City Airport deal this year, which was an $800 million deal, okay? You talk about Stifel, and we've got folks that work all over Missouri. We've got 7 people. Brent and I are interesting in that we are truly partners, and we partner together on everything we do. But our average deal size for Brent and I, the deals that we work on average, and I'm not making this up because you're doing a $6 million deal. Our average deal size is $6.5 million. So we'll do deals all the way up. Brent and I did the Lee Summit School District deal, which was almost a $200 million deal. But we also did the Shawnee R3 School District deal, which is a K-8 school district north of Clinton, Missouri, and that was a $200,000 deal. So we will work with anyone, anywhere, but the meat and potatoes of what we do is the $4 to $8 million deal. That is where Brent and I, make our living, and that is what we focus on. As local issuers, as Brent said, fire districts, library districts, school districts, particularly in outstate Missouri. We have some suburban Springfield and Kansas City clients, but we work all the way over to, I work with the Jackson School District. Brent works with the Poplar Bluff School District. We go up to the corners of the states. I work with Rawls County R2, which is a school district up almost in the northeast corner of the state, and all in between. But we really enjoy the work, and we typically would be on the road. We love to get out and see people. We would have loved to have sat in front of you today, but it is what it is. So as we talk about the market, Brent mentioned it, there are a lot of things that go into what we do as your underwriter. And we take the opportunity to make sure that what Brent and I do versus what actually is the execution of the deal, or when the rubber meets the road, right? Our job is to work with you all to make sure that we meet your goals and objectives and provide you the expertise to understand the market and understand what's going to happen with your certificates in this case when we issue them. And we want to make sure that we can give you realistic expectations, but do everything we can to meet your goals and objectives. When the rubber meets the road, as Brent mentioned, we've got salesmen and syndicators, and our syndicators are folks that their job is just to look at market data, to talk to folks, to talk to investors, to talk to our salesmen, to make sure that they start out with a reasonable deal, that they give us where we think rates are going to be. And then hopefully the market stays relatively calm and we're able to hit that market. And then, as Brent said, at that point, we structure a deal and we put it out to our over 200 bond salesmen with access to over 200,000 investor accounts all over the country to make sure that we sell the bonds at the highest price to investors. So in other words, what that means to you all is the lowest yield. Now, when we go out and we're seeking the lowest yield and you say 200,000 investor accounts, what does that matter? Brent talked about it a little bit. That's what we call market penetration, which is making sure that we have access. Believe it or not, we will be out calling on humongous trust funds, people that manage 401ks. I don't know, who manages your 401k, but Vanguard, for instance, is someone that we would sell to. Companies called NCAP and BlackRock, and these are companies with billions and billions of dollars invested in municipal bonds. But then we go all the way down. You'll see we've got an office in Joplin and an office in Springfield. So if any of you want to get a hold of these bonds in as small as $5,000 increments, you call our folks in Springfield, you call our folks in Joplin, you talk to them, you're going to have access to those. And then a big focus of what we're going to do on these particular certificates, because they're under $10 million, there is a special designation called bank qualification. And with that bank qualification, banks get essentially an additional benefit. Right now, you're able to issue debt as a library district at what we call double tax exempt status, which means that holders of those bonds, investors in your certificates, your bonds, don't have to pay income tax federally or at the state level on the interest they earn. Bank qualification is a third benefit to local banks here in Missouri. And anybody who would sell your bonds would do this the same way. So this is not unique to us, but our ability to reach banks in Missouri is unique. Banks are going to get an additional benefit to that. And I'm no bank accountant, but the best way that I've heard this described is essentially their other streams of income. They have another write-off source as banks if they invest in local bonds, essentially in bonds from local communities in Missouri at this bank qualified level. And what they're trying to do, what that purpose is there's twofold for that. It benefits banks, but it also benefits you all to get banks to come in and buy those bonds. And so what we're trying to do is find the end user for the bonds. Our ideal world is that nobody would ever trade your bonds. We want to find buy and hold people, because that means they're paying the highest price because they're not marking it up and sending it off to someone else. And that's how we're able to find the lowest yields, is to find 200,000 potential investor accounts sell those, break those up and sell those in $5,000 increments to whoever's willing to pay that price. But, at the end result, at the end of the day, we want to keep as much of that local as we can without sacrificing yield. So we would try, and we have banks down in Southwest Missouri particularly that are very active, from the bank you're used to hearing of a central bank or a Commerce Bank down there to banks, smaller banks like Lamar Bank and Trust up there outside of Joplin. I'm trying to think, some other ones, Great Southern Bank. We've got a lot of folks that will reach out, and we actually have a group of folks that do advisory services for banks and their investments. And so again, we're looking to find those end users and those people that are going to take those and put those into their accounts for investments. So, that's what happens when the rubber meets the road. Something that's interesting and unique to library districts, and this isn't going to surprise you, is there probably aren't, I don't know, Brent, 15 library districts in the state of Missouri that have debt outstanding. So when Brent and I work with the Aurora School District, for instance, when we go down and we talk to them, we know on any given day, now it takes 8 to 12 weeks to get a bond issuance ready to go and out the door largely because of our internal regulatory requirements through the SEC, FINRA, and the MSRB, which are 3 federal agencies that regulate both us as a bank and your issuance as a public issuer. So there's a lot of lag here, but the point is when we go out and we price bonds for the Aurora School District, we're going to know within 3 or 0.04% where the Aurora School District is going to end up at. And that's largely driven by the fact that they've got tons of debt outstanding. They've got an outstanding public credit rating. So we would go out to a credit agency that would be called Standard & Poor's, which would be very similar to getting your credit report before you buy a home. They've got an outstanding rating there. And then they are also required, because they have public debt, and you will be when you issue this debt, they're required to make certain disclosures on an annual basis. So investors have seen their audits, have seen other operating data on a given year. They know their board policies. They know their administration, how they execute. And believe it or not, that's part of the research that all these firms do. And we put together a document called an official statement, which is probably a 90 or 100-page document that describes you all, includes audits, and very in-depth, and allows investors the opportunity, much like a stock prospectus or a mutual fund prospectus, to see what it is that they're investing in. So when we talk about library districts, and when we did this with Newton County here, 2 years ago for their big project, there's a lot more involved in terms of us getting in and digging into your board policies, talking about the execution of your administration and how things play out on a monthly basis, day-to-day basis in your operations. We need to look at your financing. We need to dig in. There's a lot of background work that we want to do, that we do for all of our clients, but in order to find the rate and find the credit enhancements that will be the most effective for you all. So this is not just a simple kind of open book rate discussion. And with your assessed value, so you have a really big, nice assessed value. You have a nice levy. You run plenty of revenue through there. We would fully expect that you could get a rating, but we would want to make sure that we do our due diligence there and look at whether or not that's worth it. Because when we talk about credit enhancements, let me back up. There's a rating that we can get, and there's insurance, are basically the 2 key ones. So we can actually have someone ensure that the payments will be made, just like your home insurance or whatever. But those cost money, right? They are additional costs, and we want to make sure if we're going to go out and get a rating or get insurance, that we're going to see the benefit from the rate perspective. And the way that we benefit is on an unrated deal, that we put our investors, number one, the potential for investors is a little bit lower when we don't get a deal rated, because there's some people that just simply can't invest unless you have a rating. But we also, it's like having a lower credit score, right? You're going to pay a higher rate on your mortgage or your car payment or whatever it is. So we want to signal to investors that you are a solid credit, and we want to also provide those backups, but those cost money. So, we will always show you the analysis of how much money you'll save over the life of the bonds by paying that money up front. Those are some of the considerations we're making. And I know I'm just talking. I apologize. But I think the bottom line here is, you can borrow a certificated debt in Missouri out up to 25 years. Okay. So with rates where they are right now, that is certainly going to be the most economical from an annual cash flow perspective for you all to be able to issue that. 20 years is what the what the rate or what the length of a term used to be capped at. Probably 7 or 8 years ago, it got extended to 25 years. 20 years is still where general obligation bonded debt is capped at. There are other types of debt, revenue bonds, we can go out up to 35 years. You know, there are just different types of debt that you can issue in Missouri, but really where you all sit with having the levy being authorized, the best way for you is to do that certificated debt. And with rates still at historic lows, I think a 25-year borrowing financing is going to be the best route for you, but we'll show you what the difference between a 20 and 25-year would be. I apologize. We've got, believe it or not, here at our house, they were willing to send me monitors. So as it looks like I'm looking off screen, it's the equivalent of me looking at pieces of paper. I'm looking over here at a monitor I have just to the right. But you know, as we look at being able to grab $5.6 million, and again, please interrupt me, talk to me, tell me what you do or don't want to do, or if that's the right number. But I think we've talked about 6.2 million for a project, and you've got maybe 600,000 or so set aside. But if we looked at a 25-year borrowing, at an unrated deal, so let's say we did no credit enhancements, nothing like that, I think we'd be somewhere in the 3.7% range conservatively on that deal. And you'd be looking at annual payments of around $325,000 to $350,000, somewhere in there. So, I don't know, again, without digging in, without understanding what you're trying to get done, that's from a cash flow perspective, the lowest cost on a non-rated deal that we'd be able to do. We also looked at, hey, we think that you as a library district might be an A-rated credit, okay? And so what that means, that's really, really good. That's a really high rating. That's like an 800 plus type of credit rating for the equivalent individual. And that would mean your certificates, they take a notch down, because certificated debt is what's called annual appropriation debt. And I don't know how familiar you are with that or not, but this is certificated debt is a fiction of debt. It's essentially granting a leasehold right in your facilities to investors. And then you actually still are required, there is no obligation for you to make those payments. It's what's called a moral obligation. So every year you are required to appropriate within your budget those funds. So you are not actually encumbering future boards to make those payments. Every year a board will have the decision whether or not to do that. And so that takes because of that moral obligation, that takes a notch grade down from that A to that A minus. But as we look at that, that'd be more along the lines of a $300,000 to $325,000 a year type payment if we were able to get that rating. And that would bring your interest costs down to 3% or so, maybe even a little bit lower. So, in a 25-year deal, being able to go out and access capital at 3%, that's again, that's just incredible. On the day that I started at what would have been George K. Baum back in 2007, just to give you some perspective on 3% over 25 years, the state of Missouri, as a AAA rated bond, the highest rating you can be, could borrow money at 3.56% over 1 year. So if they were borrowing for 1 year, they would borrow at 3.56%. You all are talking about 0.5% lower than that on 25-year borrowing. So it's a great time to be accessing capital. It's a great time to be getting projects done. But again, our job, if you hire us, is going to be to really dig in and do everything we can to make sure we're minimizing those interest costs for you and doing it in an economical way. I know you want to speak with us as well. I know that's an important part of your decision. And so I'll hand that back over to Brent and let him chat with you on that for just a second while I take a drink.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That is, we're constantly amazed right now at the market and the rates. It's basically just given the opportunity for our public clients to go out and access capital, number one, but also access more capital than what they originally did. So, and I think Joe hit the nail on the head when he talks about digging in. That's really what we do. We are truly partners with our clients, and we want to hear from you as we guide you through this. Our direction is based upon really the goals of the district and what you want to see. We want to make sure it meets your goals. We want to make sure that you get the best deal possible. So with that said, when we talk about fees, and it kind of relates to what Joe was talking about, depending on the avenue that we go. So the fees that for underwriters fees. So that is a fee that Stifel would charge is $9 per thousand. So on a $5.5 million deal, that's just under $50,000, about $49,950 is what our fee would be. We never hesitate talking about fees because we know, obviously we think we do the best job, but we also think that we are one of the most competitive in the market as far as fees are concerned. And so we always enjoy being able to discuss that with our clients. You have other costs of issuance when you do this. You'll have special tax counsel, which will do all the documents to make sure that your entity keeps your tax exempt status, which is important. You'll have state auditors fees, you'll have paid agent fees, you'll have underwriters counsel fees. We anticipate all those to put together will be an additional about $34,000. Now, those are not our fees. We have obviously access to some very good service providers, professional service providers that can do that job for you. You can go out on your own and do an RFP for those services. We can help you with that RFP process if you're trying to get an idea to go out and bid those services. Like I said, we have some folks that we work with on most of our deals, and that's kind of where we got that additional $34,000. So, you're talking between $80,000 and $85,000 for total cost of issuance. Now, anything beyond that would be directed from you based upon a recommendation from us. So if we decide to go out and sell this thing and underwrite this, and we say, hey, we feel like an underlying rating through Standard & Poor would benefit you. In other words, the cost to do the rating would actually be an investment because your rates are going to go significantly lower if we go get that underlying rating. In other words, it would pay for itself and then some. If we don't feel like an underlying rating through an S&P would benefit the library district to get lower rates that would actually be cheaper than the rating, then we would say, don't do it. The other thing would be insurance. Sometimes we buy insurance on these things. So what happens is when we send this out to investors, they say, hey, this thing's been rated or it has insurance on it. It makes the debt obviously a more secure debt for them to buy. Therefore, it increases their costs, lowers their yields, and drives down your interest rates. So with that said, those two additional fees we may or may not use. It'll all depend on whether they pay for themselves or actually give you additional savings. If an underlying rating or insurance would not benefit the library district to actually have a cheaper overall deal when you take in the cost of issuance compared to interest rates, then we wouldn't do it. If it did, we would say, hey, you need to go ahead and invest in these two things or one thing because you're actually going to save more money by utilizing that underlying rating or insurance than not. But as far as the fees from Stifel, based upon, again, the $5.5 million in par would be $49,950. Other costs of issuance, again, we can help you through that. We can bid it, but we're estimating those would be right around $34,000. So somewhere between $80,000 and $85,000 would be total cost of issuance if we decided that an S&P underlying rating or insurance would not benefit you all. So with that said, I'd be happy to. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Mind if I jump in? Brent did a great job of explaining those rating fees and those insurance fees, but there's a reason why we mention those in a different light as well, which is, Brent talked about our fee, and we can tell you where our fee is all going, but I think that it's safe to say there'll be, even if we don't count all 200 institutional bond salesmen who will see your deal, there's 100 people here at Stifel that will touch your deal in some way, shape, or form to make sure that we're complying with all applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations. I mean, this is really, to access capital markets is by far accessing the lowest interest rates you can achieve because we break those up into $5,000 increments and sell those off. But it is not an easy process and it is not a cheap process. There is a floor. And oftentimes, if you were doing a deal under $1 million that wasn't going out very long, Brent and I often talk about how we're not very good businessmen because we'd tell you, well, you don't need to use us because we can't, there are fixed costs that we cannot go below. And even though we would get you lower rates, you're not going to benefit from using us. But what our fee is based on is trying to minimize the amount that we charge you based on the amount of work that goes into this deal. The rating agencies and the insurance companies look at themselves in a different light, and not surprisingly, they essentially, and insurance companies are a little bit more transparent about it. So I'll just tell you how they price, but the rating agencies are doing the same thing. But essentially insurance companies say, okay, we know that they make an evaluation of credit and they say, okay, we know that you borrow at 3.8% over 25 years without us. And we know with us, you'll borrow at 3.3%. So sorry, folks, we're taking half of that from you. So they actually price it by taking 25, what they call 25 basis points, or the 0.25% of the 0.5% benefit. They're saying we're keeping that in our pocket. Now you pay that up front, but that's how they calculate it. Rating agencies do the same thing. They have the benefit of being able to say to you, we know that we're a benefit to you because investors look to us. It's kind of an interesting backwards world. There's no negotiating their fee. There are only really 3 rating agencies in the entire country. There are only 2 bond insurance companies, and they're going to charge almost the exact same thing. It's a little bit of a weird deal versus, if you wanted, you could find, I don't know, 50 people that do what we do to talk to about doing our job. And, the market, the yields, as Brent said, would be about the same. We think where the rubber meets the road, where the difference is the work that Brent and I do getting you there. But that's just a little bit of a commentary on why we think of these rating agencies and insurance companies differently, and why we want to make sure that you understand that if we were to add that cost, it would be for a direct reason, and we could show you the benefits there. Even, we've talked about it a little bit here, but it's $25,000 to $40,000 a year benefit to get a rating if we think you can be a rateable credit. And it's something along the lines of 0.8% better rates. So, I mean, it is real. Those are real numbers that you can see, in terms of.
Yeah, so with that said, we'd be happy to entertain any questions in regard to the financing. Again, we can provide you many different scenarios based upon, what the goal is of the library district and what your cash flow is. And we sit down and look at budgets with folks at times, right? And say, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking. What are you thinking? Like Joe mentioned, we do this all over the state. We can look at a 20-year deal. We can look at a 10-year deal. We can look up to a 25-year deal. And the numbers we gave you were based upon a 25-year deal just for cash flow purposes. Most of our folks right now are trying to borrow as long as they can, just for the simple fact that rates are so low. So, we can give you any scenario you'd like, but that's really a direction that we would take from you. And like Joe said, do the work and partner with you all to provide you a scenario that would fit your cash flows and the goals that you have for your district.
Is there an annual fee?
Not from us. We'll be engaged as long as you want. You can talk to any of our clients about, the work that we do, and we'll sit down with you and provide, everything moving forward, because we want to make sure you're happy with our service. The only annual fee that you would incur would be from what's called paying agent. And I think Brent mentioned that. So you'll have a paying agent and a trustee. And so you'll have some higher fees up front, while actually, and I don't know if we even talked about how a certificated debt works, but certificated debt, you don't get that money directly into an account. That money actually goes into, BOK or UMB are the 2 kind of premier providers of that service in the state of Missouri. They actually hold that in an account, and you actually requisition money as you spend it. So you can do one of 2 things. You can requisition by providing them with an invoice and they'll pay it for you, or you can pay it and then request reimbursement of those funds. But so there'll be an additional fee up front for them to be what's called the trustee of your bonds and actually take care of that account until it's exhausted. But then moving forward, I don't even know these days, those fees I know have gone up, but again, we could bid that out, but I think it's between $700 and $1,000 annually that the paying agent charges. And the paying agent's job is they take the payment from you about 15 days before it's due. And then they are in charge of making sure every single holder of those bonds gets the proper payment at the right time. So, if we break those up into $5,000 increments on a $5.5 million deal, we could have over 100 investors in that particular deal. So that's what they're charging you for, essentially, is that ongoing service, but nothing from us. Our fee is upfront. We're not gonna charge you for any expenses, any travel. Again, whether we're down there meeting with you 100 times or 10 times, we put in the fee what we feel comfortable that we will provide you the top end service that we need to provide. And again, hopefully we get a chance to come down and shake everybody's hand and get to meet you in person. That's important to us. I know it's probably important to you, and we'll be chomping at the bit to get that done as soon as we can. So, yeah, that's it from us. We're done once we charge you up front. And, if you want to talk about the next financing and we talk for 3 years about that and it falls through and nothing ends up happening, you'll never see a bill from us, no matter how much work we've done. We only charge you money when the deal gets done.
I know the board has in the past said that they really prefer as many of the certificates to be done locally. So will you work locally first and then go outside our area, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we can do one of two things. The way that works primarily the best right now is that we just set aside and prioritize local orders on the day of ordering. We used to, long time ago, we used to hold separate order periods. We'd hold order periods for individuals the day before, and we'd hold an order period for institutionals the day of. And what that can do a little bit is detract from the institutional or the big buyers from coming in. And again, we always place a priority on making sure that anybody who wants your bonds there in the community, whether it's individuals or banks, have that opportunity. And if they put in an order, they're going to get that money. But we also don't want to turn down any investors from big, huge funds. And I know that sounds silly, but right now there is literally no yield to be had. It's funny that, so the discussion, just to give you an update. So on the non-rated side of things, and we talked about that 3.8%, the discussion that we had with our salesman and syndicator yesterday, I was on the phone for about an hour with them talking through your deal, is that this is the high yield space. Okay. So 3.8% over 25 years is where investors are considering high yield right now, if you can believe that. So what that means is, I don't think any of us are hoping, I'll never be able to retire if my top end is earning 3.8%, I'll be working till I'm, anyway, we don't need to go that far into the weeds, but these people are investing and buying bonds for the sake of satisfying their needs of their portfolio. They have, investments they're hoping that are earning, 20%. And then they've got some that are what they consider safe investments. And so they're really driving the market right now. When I first started here 15 years ago, it was of the utmost and vital importance that we got bonds into local hands, because those people were willing to buy at lower rates than the big companies. But now, we've got companies like State Farm Insurance, Travelers Insurance. Folks, they just need their money to be making a little bit of money when they get those premiums in the door to make sure they can cover their liabilities. So insurance companies are a huge buyer of these bonds. But yes, absolutely, Gina. The number one thing we focus on, in particular on bank qualified bonds, is getting bonds within the local community there, for whether it's your banks or, again, you want to call our folks in Joplin. We're happy to do that. Right now, we're getting ready to price a deal in Festus, for instance. And Kyle Gower is the representative there in Festus for Stiefel that holds, I don't know how many number of millions of dollars and how many hundreds of people's local accounts there in Festus. And so one of the things we're doing with him is he gets every single order that he puts in for all local individuals there. And then we'll have our bank group also trying to they've got a bank there, First State Community Bank, I believe, is based right there in Festus. So we're going to be working with them closely to make sure they get all the bonds they want. And that's buying wholesale for them too. So the nice thing about it is buying from us, buying from you all in primary issuance is like buying at Costco versus buying at Walgreens, right? You get to come in and buy wholesale, buy right up front, rather than try to go grab it from an Edward Jones or grab it from, some other money manager, just try to, sign up for some, service. you're getting it straight from us, basically straight from the warehouse. And that's a nice benefit as well. So we absolutely want to make sure that your community benefits that way. And we understand that them getting a higher yield, the bank getting a higher yield means higher interest rates for you on your deposits. And it means better, situation for your community. So that is the number one thing we focus on all of our deals in Missouri.
I think you were asking what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to borrow the least amount of money. We're hoping to fundraise things, but we do need to keep our yearly payments low because we know we won't be able to collect the full amount of the tax levy after this year.
Yeah. And, there are many ways we can go about the fundraising efforts and helping you to make sure you minimize the amount you're borrowing. So here, the number one thing and the balance that we weigh. So we did an issue I was involved in an issue for Children's Mercy here not too long ago, where we were getting ready to do a huge fundraising campaign. And the key, so we can help work with you, and I'll give you a couple options on how we can structure financing to make sure we do those things for you in terms of allowing you to fundraise and borrow the minimum amount possible. And they're 3 or 4 different ones. But the number one thing we want to do is we want to avoid what we call a donation in kind. Okay. And so what a donation in kind is rates, again, so low right now. When we go out and we price out to individual investors, like any of you on this call or anybody in your community, if they're buying bonds, let's say we go out and get an A- rating and we're buying, we're selling bonds that are yielding less than 1% for the first 5 years of your deal. And that's literally where they would be. They would be, probably what your savings account is earning, or maybe even less than that right now. People can tend to consider that a investment in kind. And we know we'll be able to sell your bonds off into the ordinary market. So if a capital campaign is a humongous part or a large part of the work that you're trying to get done, we want to make sure that we're always cognizant of really communicating with those investors. And so we'll need your help some on that as well. But if they're working with our folks in Joplin or our folks in Springfield, we want to make sure that they're not considering that an investment in kind. And that's what we ran into a lot at Children's Mercy. And so when we talked to our local folks here in Kansas City and actually all over the state of Missouri and Kansas who were wanting to donate, we talked about, hey, there's a huge capital campaign involved in this juvenile diabetes research facility that we're wanting to build. If you buy these bonds, are you going to donate? And we got a lot, probably 75% of people said, no, the bonds themselves, we're trying to help you borrow for less cost. And the answer that we kind of gave as their underwriters was, well, folks, we can find your rates somewhere else. Take the donations from your people so you can borrow less money, right? Because we can find buyers of your bonds, your certificates. And I think that's the same here. So that's one thing that, we've got a lot of experience in capital campaigns. And that's one thing that we want to really be focused on is as the timing of that comes up, where are you at in your capital campaign? Where are you at in terms of your contributions? And do we need to be careful about not prioritizing local folks, but do we need to make sure that we're informing local folks of where we would like their money to go? And we ultimately want it to go directly to you so you borrow less, right? We don't want them to consider purchasing bonds at such low interest rates to be a donation in kind like that. Well, I gave my money to purchase your bonds. There's a lot of different things we can do. And so some of those, in terms of trying to minimize the amount you borrow, we actually have banks that we work with and the rates won't be as low, but it may be something that's very attractive to you that basically we work on a line of credit type of borrowing. So we lock in an interest rate, we lock in a max amount of amount that you're going to borrow, and you only start paying interest on debt as you actually cut those checks. So if you've got if it's a 15-month build out for your facility, at $6.5 million, and we get you locked in at 4.5% from this particular bank that I'm thinking of, with a credit up to $6.5 million, you end up raising $3 million and you don't take anything out until month 10, you won't have accrued any interest and you'll pay a slightly higher interest rate than if you would have issued it all up front. But the benefit is that you get to complete your capital campaign, right? And so that would be something where When we talk to you, there are two different roles that we can take. We do what's called dual tracking. So we can be your underwriter or your placement agent. And either at any rate, what we're trying to do is find that structure, that financing at the way that is the most advantageous to meeting your goals and objectives. And so what I hear you saying, that's one that comes to mind right away. And we actually have 3 or 4 banks that will do that style of financing. So basically what they do is they do a credit analysis on you, and a bank is going to do something a little bit different than an investor. Okay. But so this will be more in the lines of a loan. But if they think that the credit would be a 3.8% in the public market, they might say, we'll give you 4%. And then we're going to charge you up to 4.5% to give you this line of credit, this ability to have a locked in fixed rate, but not actually have to borrow the full amount and not have to pay any interest until you've actually borrowed any money. So that's one particular way that you might find very attractive, that allows you to complete your capital campaign, but also get your construction started. So you can kind of mix those two in together as well, right? You can have a $6 million essentially line of credit, and you can have $1 million of money raised, in the first year. And then, you're slowly, then borrowing down on that line of credit, and maybe you have a big donor come in and you borrow less after that. Whatever the process is there, that's a nice way to do that. The other way that we can do it is by just simply splitting this issue up. Now I'll tell you that won't change our fee. We charge you by the amount of bonds that you actually issue. So we're not going to change that. There are incremental costs to going out and issuing multiple times. So if we could do, let's say, $3 million deal instead of a $5.5 million deal, and you're paying $180,000 or $200,000 a year, and then we wait to see how your capital campaign finishes up. You have the right to reimburse yourself out of your operating capital up to probably 1.5 years, give or take, after you've actually expended the dollars. So if you had the money in reserve, you could potentially have the ability to go out and reimburse yourself on down the road. That's an option as well. It's not as attractive as an option, again, because costs are going to be higher. You're going to increase the cost that you're going to pay out the door. But we could put a really, really short call on a portion of your debt. So we could, what we do call bifurcate the call. And so what that means is this is not going to look like your mortgage when we issue these bonds. When we're trying to find people that are willing to buy and hold your bonds, so buy it at the highest price or for you all the lowest yield, we have to guarantee them a certain amount of time where they get their return on their investment, right? The industry standard used to be 10 years, anything less than 10 years on a call date. So you would be bound to pay the principal and interest on those bonds for 10 years. Anything below that, you'd start paying greater yield to get that. Now we can get away with 5, 6, or 7 years, really 7 or 8's the better one. You might be paying higher rates for a 5 or a 6 year call provision, but we can take a big portion of that and make it callable in 7 or 8 years, and then take a smaller portion where you wouldn't pay as big of a penalty and make it callable in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. And what that allows you to do then is pay principal only on that debt and get that paid off so that you wouldn't be obligated to the interest on that debt. So there's, believe it or not, what we try to do is synthesize information when the rubber meets the road and give you only like 3 options, so you're not overwhelmed. There are a million different ways we can skin this cat, so to speak. Sorry, I saw 2 cats earlier. I should not have used that turn of phrase. And I own a cat. We have a cat. Our cat Zeus, I just saw him out. He's hunting birds or mice or something, walking around out here in the 60 weather because he's crazy. He'll come back in soon, I'm sure. But anyway, and that's where, again, what we think Brent and I do is so valuable is that, we are constantly out talking to banks. We're talking to investors. We're talking to other library districts. We work with, library districts there in Newton County and St. Louis, and we're trying to figure out, hey, what are you hearing? What do you know? Client X has this issue. They want to do a capital campaign. We've done it this way in the past. What kind of tools, what kind of products do you have available to them? And then we'll put together a package for you that you like. But there is an innumerable number of ways we could go about that.
I think Joe said it. We'll guide you into that, what fits. We're just, we sit down with you or spend more time with you to talk about really your budget, your campaign, fundraisers, and we won't give you 20 options to figure out yourself, right? We're just since we're so, and you all are as well, still kind of finding your way of how to finance this thing, we would be there through that. And like Joe mentioned, bring you a couple options that, and explain those very clearly after we figured out what might fit best for your budget and your campaign together to structure this thing in a way that would be most advantageous for you. So we're not going to throw a dozen at you and say, let us know, and try to figure it out. We'll hone that down to a couple options.
Mr. Piter has a question. Unmute yourself, Jana.
She can't. Gina, yeah, go ahead and type it out and we'll ask it.
Maybe.
Okay, Mr. Piter was going to ask, is it illegal for board members to buy these bonds? I hope I said that correctly, sir.
No.
It's not. These are open to everybody. You know, the only restriction you would have had was during the campaign. You could tell people to vote and you could provide them factual information, but you couldn't tell them to vote yes. But you have the absolute right to buy these, and we would put you in touch with some good people here internally that could get you an account set up and all that good stuff, again, so you could buy those wholesale and not have to buy those through your advisor. If you didn't want to, you could obviously go through whoever you work with to do your personal investments, or we can hook you up with somebody here locally, probably in Joplin or Springfield, to help you through that.
What if down the line we get a large donor who comes up with $2 or $3 million, and do we have any problems paying some of that off ahead of time, or do we just start doling out from that rather than from our budget?
Yeah, that would really depend on how we would, if that was the potential, let me back up. We would really want to make sure that we put you in a financing where that wouldn't be a problem, where you could immediately, or as close to as immediately as possible, eliminate that obligation to pay interest on that debt and have that moved on, so that you then, if you borrow $4 million initially and you have somebody willing to donate $2 million, you don't have to pay, or we can minimize the amount of interest you pay, to all of a sudden you only owe $2 million on that debt, and you're paying $130,000 a year, something along those lines. But that, the feedback that you give us on what you want to do and what you think you'll get from your investors is the most important thing to what tool your investors, from your constituents and your people who want to be a part of the library district in terms of their donations, is the most important part of what we do. And that's exactly what Brent mentioned, is if that's 100% a possibility, and we've had that happen. We had that happen in Liberty Schools, for instance. They did not want to use any debt money, and I understand that, to do stadiums for their athletic teams, for their soccer and football and band particularly. And I get that, right? That's not, there are better ways that they could spend their money, is what their board said. And so they did a capital campaign. We were there with them all the way until the end, ready to, if they needed to, do a debt issuance. And then literally at the last minute, the local Ford dealership there, as they were getting ready to issue their lease certificates to finish the project, and then hopefully they'd get donations to come in over time that would allow them to not have to make those payments. They actually had the local Ford dealership go in and buy the naming rights to both of those stadiums, and so they didn't have to issue any debt. Again, we didn't charge them anything. We worked with them for a number of hours, making sure they were in good shape. But that's something that's possible. So they could pay down principal only, or you could get someone, again, a donation that runs over time. If it's $100,000 a year, and we can take that basically out of your obligation. So they just have to designate that donation to go towards that project, and you can use it in your operating funds as you get it to pay that debt and reduce your overall debt on those certificates. So there's a number of ways we can do that, but we would make sure that we tailored that to what you thought was reasonable and what you thought would happen in terms of how those donations would come in.
Okay, thank you.
Is the financing? Hey, Gina,
Jan?
I have to leave the meeting because we need to leave Kansas City to get home. So I'm sorry.
Thanks, Jan.
Good
Sorry.
luck. Be safe.
Be careful.
Be safe.
Safe travels.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Katie?
Is the financing something that we can combine? Like you talked about a line of credit. Could we start out with that, see how much money we can raise during our fundraising, and then if we need to, later issue bonds?
Yes, so you could do something much lower. I mean, yeah, you're dead on there, and that's part of the number of options we can give you. But if we wanted to go out and take a bid to some banks on that line of credit for, let's say, $3 million, and you borrowed up to that point, hit your capital campaign, and then rates were still very low, and you wanted to go out and do the remaining portion as certificated debt over a period of time, that would be something that would allow you to do that. And the benefit to that as well, again, is the 25 years is our cap. So the longer we can wait to issue the debt, the more money that comes in the door. That helps us from a cash flow perspective annually in two ways. As long as rates don't go up significantly. Number one, it allows us to kind of go a little bit further out. And number two, it allows you obviously to reduce the amount that you have, that you owe on that debt. So if we can, wait until the last possible second, again, absent something happening with interest rates, this is all predicated on, we've got, $1.9 trillion stimulus package that is potentially going to get passed. We just heard on Monday on our nationwide call, we got one of our market experts on our call, and he talked through what essentially was happening with treasuries and municipal bonds. And you don't need to hear all that, but mostly our industry tracks your ability to borrow, tracks with the federal government's ability to borrow money, which is their T-notes, T-bills, all of that stuff. So we watch what we call treasury rates very closely. Treasury rates have gone up, not, to pre-2008 or 9 levels. I mean, they're still incredibly low, but they've gone up. Municipal rates, or your ability to borrow, hasn't changed. So though what we call the credit spreads have condensed, and we don't know what a $1.9 trillion package will do. We don't think it'll raise rates a ton, but that would be the only caveat to anything we're saying, is that we might come to you and say, we just want to be clear that we feel that rates are going up, and here are your options on that, and then allow you to make an informed decision.
Okay. Any other questions? Gina?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your time and your effort.
Very much.
Yes,
we appreciate you giving us the opportunity. Joe and I are passionate about these things and enjoy helping folks out. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to seeing your continual growth and progress with your library district. Congratulations on such a well-run organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Food for thought.
It is just a quick thing. The libraries are not going to open. The ones that are open today, which are just the 4 big ones, won't be opening until noon because of the street conditions. And I don't know about tomorrow. I don't know. It's supposed to be worse tomorrow. So we may end up closing the district for tomorrow. So we'll just see how things progress today. But I just wanted you all to have a heads up. So.
Okay.
Gina,
Yeah.
I was just curious if we should give Stiefel more information so they can it sounds like they need more from us, so we know more what they can do for us. So have you met with them, and maybe is that something that we can do before our meeting on next week?
I think part of it is until from what I heard from them, until they have time to really sit down in order to make good recommendations, they're not going to really put themselves out there. I mean, Larry Hart, I think pretty much it's the same thing. They gave us a scenario, but that may not be the only scenario. They were just trying to give us information about what would happen if we had to borrow that amount of money at a certain interest rate. But I don't know.
So you think the line of credit is something
I
they
mean,
can
I can-
do too?
I don't think so. I think Larry Hart, they do, at least from my understanding, they're a little bit different in that they're not quite as national as Stiefel is. So I think Stiefel has bigger power because they're a bigger company.
They just seem more willing to
I don't
help
know that-
us than the other company.
I think it's just a different approach. And obviously I was pretty impressed with the fact that their fees were significantly lower.
Mhm. Even
But
the
again, I
annual
think-
fee was lower.
And when we worked with LJ Hart before on financing, when we combined Marionville and Cassville, one of the problems were they were not local. They did not have a local representative. We were always working with them out of either Kansas City or St. Louis. The idea that Brent and them are local there in Springfield might make, questions a little more readily available for answers, problems, changes that we were willing to make or asking if we could make might make it a little bit easier to work with them than working with somebody completely out of our area.
The fees are a huge big deal because when you have to roll those into the loan,
Yeah.
man.
Then your
that's-
loan's way up there then.
I don't have my paperwork in front of me since I'm at home, but I remember, weren't those fees several $100,000 total?
Yeah. Yeah, they were.
So
I
we're
mean, he
looking-
was talking 84,000, an estimate on some of the fees. And LJ Hart, they were well over $100,000 because everybody
Yeah.
was just kind of, jaw dropping when you mention those fees that go into the total balance.
Yeah,
And
I
they
remember. it
charge
was
us
around a-
travel fees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought their fee was somewhere around 130, 140,
Yeah.
somewhere.
And just simple things like Page Nation and things like that they were charging for, were pretty high for making simple copies of things that you needed. And that seemed a little high to me.
Yeah. Julie, you're awfully quiet.
Do what?
You're awfully quiet. Do you have any thoughts on?
I don't know. This process is going to be, very difficult, and just whoever can do the better job. Alex, you've probably worked with several and seen how some work, function.
I actually can't bring any context to it. This is a dimension of projects that we don't really get involved in. I was just joining in as a courtesy and make sure that I could answer
Okay.
their questions or yours. This is the first, these two, LJ Hart and Stiefel, are the first of these presentations I've ever seen.
Oh,
Okie dokie. Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me.
Deborah,
Yes, ma'am.
do you have any thoughts?
Not big ones that anybody else hasn't talked about. I really like the idea of staying local with our business. I like the fact that Stiefel will customize whatever we need to do and that we can change in the middle if our circumstances change. Those to me were pretty big deals.
They didn't talk about it, but I'm pretty sure they're the ones that did the Mid-Continent Library up in Kansas City deal. And because I was at several presentations that they did together, Steve Potter, the director there, and Stiefel. And Stiefel saved them millions their project was huge.
Yeah.
Because they're remodeling and rebuilding every single library in their district, which is like 30 different libraries, if they hadn't already been done. And I know over the life of what they had to do, it was several $1 million that they ended up saving them because of how they structured it differently than they had anticipated. And so that's how I got the business card for them. But the Neosho used them as well. So Newton County is what he kept saying. But
Well, there's a reason they're the best, they're the biggest, so because they can do the most, I guess, or have different ideas about things, so. Mr. Piter, I know you can't answer, but we hope you'll give us some of your feedback at the next meeting.
we meet next Thursday.
Okay.
God willing, and the creek don't rise or freeze over.
It may freeze over.
Yeah.
So, anything else we need to talk about today?
So do you want us to come ready next Thursday with what we want to do? Like we need to decide between the two of these?
I don't know that you have to decide at the next meeting, but I think it would be good to do it sooner than later so that we can get started. I mean, it sounds to me like with either company, there's going to be legwork that Joyce and I are going to have to do. Because Larry Hart, really feels that we should do the Standard & Poor's if it benefits us, but that's going to be quite a bit of work. We want to make sure we're ready to hit the ground running when we have to actually start building and construction.
Yeah.
Based on current schedule, first pay app will come from RE Smith somewhere between August and September.
Okay.
So I would say at least by the March meeting, you need to make a decision.
Okay. Yeah, because he said, 8 to 12 weeks?
Mhm.
So we'd have to do it by then in order to make that deadline. Actually, we probably should do it this month, just to make sure.
I
But you
agree with
guys
that.
you can do some legwork. I mean, they're both open companies, so you can get online and look at information about them and what other people are saying. So that's what I'm going to do.
I was really impressed with them last time. Courtney, I thought, was very impressive, but I liked these guys. It seemed like there was more back and forth. And I don't know if that is just my imagination. You always like the last thing you hear. I think you have a tendency to. You've got to be careful of that. But I did think there was a lot of back and forth. And of course, I liked the one having been a superintendent, because I think they're used to pinching pennies pretty tight, and I think that hopefully that's worth something. Joyce, how's your husband doing?
Well, he's about status quo. I mean, until they're able to replace this knee, he's in constant pain. He has very little mobility. It's a struggle right now. We're supposed to find out the counts of the bacteria, hopefully today, and that'll let us know. I'm still doing the infusions 3 times a day, and we'll be doing those for the next few weeks. And has to hit 0, and it has to remain at 0 for 2 weeks before they will consider the 4th surgery. So it's just a process, but it's about to wear him out. But it is what it is.
You aren't needing to go anywhere like for appointments or anything this week, I hope.
Well, he's supposed to have one on Thursday, but I think it's either going to have to be virtual or they're going to have to do it over the phone. There's no way I can get him out. That's a process when you have 14 steps and he can't climb steps. That's, I think it's too much, and the weather's too bad right now. It really affects him. If a front comes through, that joint swells and it hurts even worse than it does the rest of the time. So it's not a good thing. So I think they're going to have to moderate. They're going to have to either do it virtually or they're going to have to do it over the phone, because I'm not taking him out.
Okay, so if we have nothing else to discuss right now, we need a motion to adjourn. Mr.
I'll
Piter? Deborah moves, Mr. Piter seconds. Meet this meeting. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
And Katie and Julie need to stay on because we need to talk about fundraising.
Okie dokie.
We'll
you.
see the rest of y'all later. Thank you for your time.
Okie
You don't-
dokie.
You don't need me, do you? I need to go, I need to actually go feed him. So, okay,
You're excused. You're good.
thanks a
Bye,
lot.
Joyce.
Are you there, Greg?
I am. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. Sometimes it doesn't work, and I talk to myself apparently for like 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden realize they can't hear me. But my internet crashed at my house, so I'm at the library.
Well,
And-
mine crashed too, and so I'm using a hotspot.
Yeah, do not come to the library and get out of your car until I get some ice melt out there. Because I mean, I'm pretty sure-footed. I'm actually like a billy goat. I'm like a big fat billy goat, and I hardly ever fall. And I was like, this is dangerous slick. Like I thought I might have to crawl. It's that slick. So do not get out of your car at the library until I put some ice melt out there.
How are the streets?
The streets were fine because they're treated, but the sidewalks and our parking lot is absolutely a sheet of solid ice. Super dangerous. Hip breaker.
Okay. Uh-oh, we lost Julie.
Could just be your video.
That
She
could
might just
be.
listening.
And I don't think Mr. Piter's still, well, I don't think he's still on either, so.
No.
Gina, do we still need to be live for YouTube?
Oh, shoot, no. Thank you. I meant to.